So, yeah, I was talking about Gemini, right? We were talking about Gemini. I was talking about Gemini.
Well, you were the one talking, so.
Yeah. What was it? Yeah, you were... Okay, so you were saying that the difference maybe between Gemini and Virgo has to do with, like, the... maybe stopping to... I don't know, what were you saying about the difference between Gemini and Virgo? Because
I mean, Virgo is discerning. So
yeah.
I feel like Gemini is like the fire hose. Like, Gemini just tries to take everything in. Like, I'm going to take the universe and cram it into my head like Mr. Universe. And Virgo is, more discerning. And it's like, okay, this is the information that is actually important, while also having the confidence in its own ability and, its own connection to Mercury to be like, okay, if I need all of the fine details, if I need the full fire hose, I can get all of that data, but I can, I'm smart. I can pick out what I actually need right at this moment. And then if I need more later.
Yeah. Well, and that's...
I can do.
There we go. That's it. As Virgo has that discernment, and it is interested in, like, the correct way of doing things. I feel like Gemini, though, like, doesn't actually give a fuck about if it's correct or not. It's interesting because, and that's not even like a bad thing, really, the way that we think about it, because it's like opposite Sagittarius. It's like Sag wants to moralize, has almost more in common with Virgo in the sense that it's looking for the correct, maybe, approach. But it's like Gemini has, it's almost like this freedom because it knows already that that nothing is actually true or something. Like, I was actually looking at Socrates' chart, and he had the sun in Taurus, but he had Mercury and Venus conjunction in Gemini.
Oh, and, interesting.
Was a quote that I really liked. That got me. That was like, "That's Gemini. That's it." Was that the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing at all. And, like, thinking about, like, what that does in terms of just liberating you to do what you will with all the information that's out there. Because Gemini can, like, hold two totally opposite opinions at the same time, and it can do that because it's like they're both true and they're both not true. Like, they're just it's just knowledge. It's just stuff to know, and it's about what you do with it, or about how much fun it is, or yeah, I it's like the scary part of Gemini, though, too, because it's, like, capable of anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, we were talking about my Mars in Gemini before we started recording, and something that I really struggle with is that I am acutely aware of the fact that if you back me into a corner, I can argue you into just about anything, and there is no way. Like, even other Mars and Geminis, I've run into this. Like, I can out-argue anybody. Like, when I was a kid, everybody was like, "You're going to be a trial lawyer. Like, you don't have any choice. Like, you just are a trial lawyer all the time." And of course, that's not what happened. I'm here, but Gemini is aware of the fact, I think, at a fundamental level, that truth is often about how you present the world and not about any kind of fundamental meaning, which of course drives Sagittarius absolutely bonkers.
Oh, yeah. That's it. I mean, shoot, I lost my train of thought. No, what was it? My partner has the same, actually, not the same, it's the opposite, or different. She has a mutual reception between Mercury and Mars, except Mercury is in Scorpio and Mars is in Virgo. And it's also in her 11th and 9th houses. So those two are exchanging, and she totally has, like, the lawyer mentality, like she could easily be a lawyer and also can totally destroy you in an argument. It's almost like, I think, almost more like a spider webby kind of approach to arguing, where it's like catching, like, finding the fault. Virgo. It's like Virgo likes to find the fault in things. That's, like, what it's good at. It's like finding where the imperfection was and then attacking it. While Gemini, it's like, because they can adopt any perspective, any viewpoint, they can outmaneuver you in any argument because they can just adopt the position that will counter yours. Like,
yeah,
makes sense. And it drives me nuts too. That almost like more. I can get the Virgo approach because like I get that. The Gemini approach, it's like, I know what you're doing and I'm not fast enough to maneuver it. I have Mars in Aquarius where it's like a little more of a like, here's what's correct and true. Like Aquarius likes to know what the principle is that you're shooting for, and maybe gets the truth is subjective and stuff, but here's what the right thing to do is, Gemini was a little more like the moral flexibility. I think is what gives Gemini the bad reputation, but it's like also its superpower. Its superpower is that
because there is no truth, but what I say it is.
Yeah, well, if I can convince you that it's true, then it's true.
It's like, if we give you 1,000 years, you're going to build like the most epic battle fortress that has ever been constructed, and it will be completely impervious to any army or atomic weapon, whereas I'm a freaking octopus. Like, I move fast, I ink, I change my colors, and you never know where I am, or even if that pile of rocks over there is me or not. Like,
when it doesn't have to stick to the position either.
Exactly.
Well, actually, I get to talk about Charles XII again.
Yes!
Because you can check out the episode of Astrology Hotline that isn't even out yet. Actually, it'll be out soon, but I'm going to talk about it.
Do it later.
I'll use this part. Where Charles XII was he was the king of Sweden. The beginning of the 1700s, was known basically as like this brilliant strategist, warrior king, and his whole approach to battle was always to be on the offensive. And he basically had just a skill for just taking his army, which was always outnumbered by the enemy, and just charging into them and like just finding the weak point in the army and just exploiting it. And just never defending, never holding ground, just attacking. That's Mars and Gemini. He had Mars and Gemini. Ruling his MC is a Leo rising, though. But anyway.
This is starting to sound familiar. This is starting to sound way too much like my chart.
You have a bit in common with Charles XII, though not nearly as much 12th house. You have no 12th house.
That's probably...
Well, you...
Except by progression.
12th house ruler, but...
Yes.
I think about that, actually. We can talk. We can just jump into progressions, right? I don't know if I use them as much as you do. I am interested in them, and I use like maybe the progression of the moon a little bit, but or just like the change of a sign seems to be significant. But I've never been able to reconcile maybe the idea of like the planet switching houses, because especially when you're thinking in maybe the traditional context, planets in the 11th house are generally positive because they have that energy of rising to the 10th house. Eventually they will become the 10th house. So there's that hopes and dreams and ambitions and, just that I'm on my way kind of energy. But then by progression, those planets are going into the 12th house, which is kind of the opposite flavor. So what do you think of that?
Oh goodness. I'm going to try not to take up the rest of our time. But the reason why I got into progressions in the first place is because I had a very, very extreme response to my Mars going from being in the 11th to being in the 12th. When my Mars went into Cancer, closely followed by my Mercury, and my progressed Mars and Mercury have been conjunct for like the last 5 years practically. Which explains some of the drama stuff that we were talking about earlier that I don't want to go into now.
Already in mutual reception too.
Yeah. Yeah, and so to have them be together by progression, like it was very loud. Like I when Mars went into my 12th house Cancer, it was, Mars was the vanguard, which, in some ways you really want that to be the case, because Mars is, looking out for threats and it's protective and defensive. But
Hmm.
like having Mars go into Cancer for me, it felt like all of a sudden the lights went out.
Mm.
I'm a very fiery person, as we were talking about earlier, and um, having Mars in Cancer, just it felt like I was a firework that got dumped into a bucket of water.
Mm.
Like I lost all of my energy. All of a sudden, I got much more sensitive. It felt like, I went from being, this octopus who's confident, who can dart around everywhere and is confident in my ability to protect myself, to suddenly feeling like a soft shell crab, or like a sea snail without a shell,
Mm.
still vulnerable. And they should theoretically be the same thing, right? Like what's the difference between a sea slug, essentially, a snail without a shell, and an octopus? Really, they're, soft creatures that are very tasty to predators. And but the strategies are fundamentally different.
Hmm.
The sea snail doesn't have the ability to change colors. It doesn't have the ability to create a cloud of ink. Its strategy is the shell.
Hmm.
And if you take the shell away, all of a sudden it is completely vulnerable and open to anything. And I had this really bizarre experience of being like, I have not fundamentally lost my nature. I still had that Mars and Gemini mutability and changeability, and uh, people don't really talk about Gemini as being soft, but I feel like the flexibility is a
Hmm.
softness, like the two of them kind of go together. So I had that same fundamental nature, but it was like all of my old techniques didn't work anymore. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I've been learning is that what I have essentially been trying to learn how to do is learn how to be an octopus who has a den
Mm.
or a shell. Like before I had anything in Cancer, I was an octopus in the open ocean. And when my progressed Mars went into Cancer, all of a sudden I was learning how to use natural features in the environment to be protective for me,
Hmm.
because I suddenly found myself much more sensitive and vulnerable. And I would not have thought to start doing that kind of thing. I would not have thought to start protecting myself that way if I hadn't suddenly started feeling more sensitive and vulnerable. So the the universe was, and I hate saying the universe like that, but it's like the universe was conspiring to teach me a new way of being in the world that I could add to the skills that I already had as a Mars and Gemini. But the way that it did that was by making me feel like the old skills that I had did not exist anymore.
Yeah.
And that is why I work with progressions. And that's why progressions are so important to me, because I've realized in my own experience that a planet moving into a new sign, and I'm right there with you. I really emphasize that a lot in my practice.
Mm.
But a planet moving into a new sign is learning new things, and it's very exciting, and you're expanding the things that are possible for you. But it doesn't feel like that when a planet first moves into a sign. It feels
Yeah.
like all of a sudden your old way of being is gone.
You're in
You can't.
unfamiliar territory. Yeah. Like you're
Exactly.
have to adapt to a new way. And actually, that
Hmm.
you described fits really well. It's like Mars and Gemini. What its strength is its ability to not commit to
Yeah.
to defending maybe a position. While Mars in Cancer, it's what it has to do. It has
Yeah.
to defend. It has to have a den to protect. Now it actually makes me
Yeah.
want to look at Charles XII's progressions, because he did have,
Ooh.
his great fall from power. Basically resulted in the end of the Swedish Empire, because he didn't defend his territory. He just sort of like because he was just like, I'm just going to conquer Russia. I'm just going to conquer all of it. And it doesn't really matter what they take of ours, because I'm just going to crush them. And then when he couldn't do that, it was like, oh, my strategy doesn't work anymore. Let me keep applying it until it works.
It's so cringe for me because I can see myself doing something like that if I was, it's kind of one of those here by the grace of luck go I, kind of things.
That's a really good way to look at maybe progressions, though. It's like you're kind of being called to play by a new set of rules, and it kind of comes with having to learn a whole different set.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that familiarity, that uneasiness. I'm just thinking about my progressed ascendant, which moved into Leo, and it pretty much corresponded with like doing like podcasting and like becoming a more public, and it is unfamiliar territory to me. But it's good to know some Leos to guide the way. I talk so much shit about Leos too. I feel bad.
Everybody does. Somebody was just talking shit about Leos to me yesterday, and I'm just like, yes, I know. I share a rising sign with Donald Trump. Thank you. You don't have to remind me.
Yeah, it's easy, but it's also it's because we're all jealous. We all want to be Leos. I know I'm jealous a little bit.
And the secret is, I've compared notes with a lot of Leo risings. I think that the secret is that everybody really wants to be a Leo, because even the Leo risings don't feel like Leo risings on the inside.
Yeah. Well,
Leos have a shell too. We're just not as good at showing it as Cancers are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just talking to somebody about this, where there's like a separateness that comes with authority when you have authority, or when you're, just by nature being like a public persona, suddenly people look at you in that context, and that puts you in this other sort of category, which is separating, which the sun, wants to do. It wants to be, singled out in a sense. Maybe the sun in Leo, like just by itself, is perfect in that situation. But most Leo risings don't have the sun in Leo. So it's like, maybe, especially like a sun in Taurus, it's like a Venus-ruled sun. Venus doesn't necessarily want to be, certainly not excluded or separated. It wants to be more connected and equal with people. The Taurus is a little more fine with being alone. I don't know.
I don't know about that. I don't know if this is the influence of my Aquarius moon or what, but I find that, I definitely want to be on stage, but I want everybody else to be on stage with me.
Yeah.
Like when I saw the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, and I saw that the way Queen essentially made the entire audience to be part of the band in certain songs by writing them into the music, I was like, I know exactly what that is. Like, I haven't looked at Queen's chart or Freddie Mercury's chart, but there's got to be some kind of synastry there between me and them, at the risk of sounding arrogant, because I can understand that instinct to want to be a rock star. And then once you're actually in the position of being a rock star, being like, wait a minute, everybody else needs to be up here. I need to share this experience with everybody, because this is so freaking amazing. And like, all of a sudden you can see how you shine, and that puts you in a position of seeing how everybody else shines. And it's like, wait a minute, this isn't fair. Why do I get to be up here when everybody else isn't up here? Come on here. Come
sing. And all the Cancers and Capricorns in the room maybe are like, no, fuck you.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends with Cancer. I feel like it very much depends on whatever state the moon is in. I think that Cancer will
full moon
love to be on stage, depending on like the phase of the moon or the sign that the moon is in. I think we were talking about that a little. It's like Cancer's like it's the nighttime Leo. It's I don't know how many Cancers outside of me, but
a few.
They will talk your ear off, right? Like once they are in the mood, once you get them, get them comfortable and relaxed, give them some wetness. It's actually just reading. What was it? I'm trying to remember what I was reading. Might have been.
We
Benani.
definitely just earned our explicit rating just there. Congratulations.
Well, it might have been Benani. I don't know. But saying that basically, because wetness is terrible, temperament-wise, because it's water, and water is feminine, and feminine stuff is bad. From the medieval maybe perspective again, but alcohol made people wetter in terms of temperament, and it's also like made them lazy and slack off. But also, when you get drunk, you are you connect with people a lot more easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
It loosens you up. And I think that's like an element of Cancer that maybe gets sort of glossed over when you're thinking about it in terms of like the crab in the shell and wanting to protect itself.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, until you're in. And then once you're in, hey, it's like Leo in like a close-knit circle or something. Like I feel like the Cancers that I've known, once you get past that, they are these kind of boisterous, really talkative people that like attention. That you almost become a lot of Leo-y kind of qualities. But it's the exaltation of Jupiter. Jupiter is Jupiter's a planet that is not afraid to be out there.
Oh, that's for damn sure. I feel like I resonate with that a lot, though, as a Leo Taurus person. Like, if you saw the way that I am in groups that I'm not comfortable, where I don't feel like I have a definite role, like you would think that I was a Cancer or a Capricorn, or just a or even a Scorpio, maybe, like a very very introverted person. And, you get me in a situation where, I know where my role is. We're geeking out about astrology, and people watching this are probably going to be like, oh yeah, absolutely, she's a Leo rising. Like, there's no doubt about that. But like, you put me at a garage party full of people who are doing, chit chat about like lawn care and stuff. And you would have no idea that I have any Leo in my chart whatsoever.
Yeah, and see, and that's a funny thing though with Cancer, is it it's once you get them in their comfort zone, they maybe become more like Leos, but they're actually usually pretty good with those situations of where they need to find a way to relate to to just common people or something. The moon
you've got that shell.
Yeah, it's like because you have the protection. Leo's just out there, so it might in a way be more selective about its audience. But Cancer isn't really looking for an audience until it gets to that sweet spot for the moon, I guess. So we say the moon signifies like the bourgeois class, like the old school middle class, which is kind of like the modern middle class, if we even have one anymore. But it's another topic entirely.
I mean, which middle class? Yeah. I feel like the gap between the lower middle class and the upper middle class is getting wider every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Saturn would be more like working class, and Moon would be more upper middle class, I guess, or what people mean when they're talking about bougie. Astrology podcast was talking about Taurus being bougie, and I was like, what? I was like, the Moon's a little bougie, Libra's super bougie. I don't know about Taurus, though. Taurus is a little too...
No, I don't think so.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
we cannot be the side of bankers and be bougie at the same time. Like, you can't have both. You have to pick one.
Yeah.
Pick a negative stereotype, please. Don't just throw them all on us.
People don't get Taurus.
I'm speaking for Leo here, too.
Yeah.
I get so much pushback. And maybe this is just the fact that, I have so much Marsy shit going on in my chart. But, like, I feel like, I hear everything that everybody has to say about Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Leo and Scorpio. Like, everybody thinks that Ada needs to hear this shit. And I'm like, you think that you're being original and you're not. Like, I have heard this so many times before.
I've heard all of it, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's I guess it's like anything. Like, there's always some kernel of truth to most stereotypes, but it's like, and it's hard too when you're trying to. I don't know. Feel like I'm doing the thing where I play both sides or something to myself.
I have a Libra IC. Just go for it.
Yeah, like I get it. I don't know. It's like when you're trying to get people's attention, which you have to compete with so much that's grabbing people's attention. It's like you want to go for the most extreme or the funniest or the most whatever of the thing you're talking about to make it pop out. But then it's like you end up with a whole just world full of like the most extreme versions of things where you don't necessarily know what the middle looks like.
Yeah. All of the nuance is gone.
Yeah.
You just get a world of neon. It's like freaking Vegas everywhere. That is the internet.
That's exactly it. What do we do about that? I don't know.
We need more Scorpios. We need more Cancers, We need more of that like nuance and deep conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Is that friend Tristan on Astrology Hotline? He was saying something about Scorpio and how Scorpio has this like you can kind of see Scorpio in like a floral print dress or like a Scorpio will totally peacock. I feel like almost either to fit in or to like, or just for the sake of undermining people's expectations. I don't know if you get that with Scorpio ever.
Oh yeah, I have a Scorpio person in my life who used to very, very like big Scandinavian dude who would wear skirts to school just to subvert people's expectations. And like normally he would wear like, he's a Gen Xer, so the generation is different. He would come to school in like gothy industrial gear with like the mesh shirts and stuff, but then every once in a while he would show up in like a skirt that he swore was a kilt so he could wear it to school.
And just it's because that's like Aries will attack you head on, but what does Mars do when it's in water, like it provokes, right? It's like provokes the reaction from you so that you can fall into its trap and it can pounce like, oh, you think
then you
there's something wrong,
and it's like I
win. Like that's I know I always think of like a scorpion, like actually started a meme once that I never finished, but it was like a little scorpion with like peacock feathers like hiding like in front of its Scorpio tail. It's like no one will ever know, no one will ever see through my disguise. And it's I feel like I can always spot like Scorpios are so obvious to me now. Once that thing about Scorpio, I was like, now I know. I can always spot one now because they will be super chill and cool, but they'll be doing something weird to almost get you to like challenge how normal they think that they're being or something. I don't know. It's a weird game that Scorpio plays, in which I mean, I know I have to be doing it on some level. I've done it before for sure. Remember in high school, I would just wear vests over everything because I thought vests were really cool. But on one level, it was like, I'm just wearing a vest because I like vests. I'm not trying to get a reaction out of anyone. It's such a I don't know.
I was exactly the same way as a teenager. Like I lived in like the waspiest Connecticut town. Like
waspiest.
Wet Anglo-Saxon Protestant, like very like my classmates got BMWs for their 16th birthday and like my grandparents were factory workers. Like very, very like talk about class. Like I was definitely a fish out of water in that environment. And so I responded by being like, okay, you know, you're dressing in Abercrombie and Fitch and your dad buys and sells hospitals for a living. I'm a punk rocker and I'm going to be proud of that. And I would be like, you know, like piercing my ears in the middle of math class and stuff. And like, I'm not doing it to get a reaction. This is just who I am.
I'm just expressing myself organically. And see, this is where I think where I'm missing Leo, because I have like the T square minus Leo. Maybe with you with Leo rising is like I have such a complicated relationship with like that. With like I'm not trying to present myself in any way. I'm not trying to get attention, but like I totally am. Especially now, and maybe it's the progressed ascendant, right? I don't know. Now that I'm actually trying to do something that is public, and like I have to actually confront my discomfort with trying to seek out attention from people. I feel like Leo is just equipped to deal with that arena. Like, I don't know.
Healthy Leo.
Yeah.
A healthy Leo that knows what it's doing is definitely equipped. I feel like there are certain things, or maybe it's just certain people, you know, they're born with the chart that they have. And, you know, if you take a default stance where you're like, you know, this is good or this is bad or this is easy to use or this is not easy to use, it's like, well, you know, yes, if the person knows how to use it properly. But I really feel like there are some people, and I'm saying this because I feel like that myself in a lot of ways, who are born with a birth chart. And, you know, going back to an image that I used at one point, I don't remember if it was on the podcast or not, but like, it's like some people are born with a birth chart that is like an Uzi, and then they're kicked out of heaven. And it's like, you know, okay, you're here to learn how to use this. Like the Scorpio who has an excellent use of their tail, but doesn't actually know that they're doing it. So they're going around stinging people to death, and they don't need to do that. They can have more nuance because they're able to defend themselves well. I feel like with Leo rising, in particular, especially for people who don't have a lot of support from other signs or maybe other Leo planets, the skill of Leo rising, and maybe this is going to be something that you're going to find intuitively because of your support from other planets, but you have to be able to not take yourself seriously if you have Leo rising. The reason why Trump is such a problem is because he takes himself more seriously than anybody else. And if you have Leo rising, you kind of have to realize that there is something about you fundamentally that is ridiculous. And if you can't find the humor in it, then you are going to be the most obnoxious person in the room. And like, I had this really big epiphany a few years ago. And I think that was when I really started to integrate the humility you were talking about with Virgo. Where I realized, you know, the ridiculousness of my particular Leo rising is that I'm essentially like a golden retriever. You know, people who don't know me very well don't know that because I've gotten wounded so much for it, and so I am very reserved until I know that I can get away with it with people. But you know, if I know you very well, and you know, you're in my safe Cancer zone, I guess. You know, I will tackle hug you and knock you to the floor when I see you. Like, I am very enthusiastic to see you. I don't hide my enthusiasm about anything. If I'm delighted by some kind of stupid thing, like seeing a hummingbird out the window, I will show it unabashedly. And I realize that is completely undignified and ridiculous, especially since I have the tendency to hang out with so many Gen Xers who can't be arsed to care about anything. But it took me a while to realize that is who I am. That is what I am. That is what I bring to the table. And if people don't like it, they're the wrong audience for me.
Yeah.
And they just, I either need to get up and go find another audience, or I need to continue doing what I'm doing while I'm watching people stream out of the room. And that is the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah. What? And I think that Leo is, I mean, it's, we were talking about fire, right? And it's like fire has that quality of, it'll just burn. It'll just do its thing. And then it might afterwards look at the effect and the result of the fire
Yeah.
burning. I think maybe what's the challenge and maybe the big difference between like Cancer and Leo is Cancer maybe or water or like the opposite side of that is constantly looking at how others are reacting to what you're doing, to the point where it's like, do you you don't even necessarily get to, it takes a long time to actually figure out what kind of weirdo or what kind of what the ridiculous thing is about you, because it's like you don't necessarily get to see it for a while because you're constantly augmenting your behavior based on what other people are doing or how they're responding. Which is why people like Cancers, honestly. It's what makes Cancers really nice to be around, is because they are paying attention to you and they give a shit about how you feel, and they want to make things as comfortable for you as possible. And it's a good quality, but, you know, it's like there's, I guess, a price, right, for that. Or
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a quality of the night sect planets in general. Because, you know, the moon, you just very articulately talked about why that is when you were talking about Cancer. Even though the moon and Cancer are not the same, they, you know. But Venus is doing the same thing because it's constantly looking at building rapport. And Mars is constantly doing threat assessment. You know, so you bring those three planets together and they're all looking at what's going on around them, but for fundamentally different reasons.
Yeah. Well, and it's back to temperament. I feel like we're just going to keep revisiting temperament all the time, but the moon...
Oh, no. This is perfect, because I was talking about this with my patrons, and they were like, ooh, he knows temperament? We know what your next podcast has to be about. And I was like, I will do my best. We'll see.
Yeah, it's... I think the point is to try to just go with whatever comes up. And that means that we're probably going to weave in and out of temperament. And maybe eventually we'll cover it. You're just going to have to stay tuned and you'll get the full story eventually, maybe. But
we need to do a content warning. This is only partly about temperament.
Yeah. We don't really know what it's about until it's happening.
Oh, hell no. That's the fun of it.
I know. I got to jump in for the conversation about temperament for a minute. And then I was like, only have so much time, but now I can talk about temperament. But
yes,
the moon and Venus, the nocturnal planets, they're by their temperament is cool and wet, and that's exactly the response of cold and wetness, of phlegmatic, the phlegmatic temperament type. It's responsive to other people, but also, God, I was thinking about this today, about coldness versus heat, and how to word this. Because the thing with like coldness is it tends to, in terms of like character or how it manifests for a person, is they tend to be more self-critical and self-restraining and almost like anti-self in a way. That's an extreme maybe way of framing it, but just thinking about it in those terms. Why is Venus so benefic, right? Is it because it brings two people together, and reconciles people and harmonizes people, but that sort of means letting go of something about one piece to make it accommodate the other one, you know, so there has to be a certain amount of willingness to let go of self to have that, maybe. Again, we're getting into abstract territory. It's getting hard to word it because I'm like just thinking about this today. But
the word that comes to mind for me is softness. It's like you have to mold yourself around the other person. You need to, you know, if two people are going to be complementary puzzle pieces, they either need to naturally fit together perfectly, and if so, that's nice. Otherwise, they need to make changes so that the meshing will fit properly.
Yes.
And there's a sacrifice of the self that is necessary in order to do that, because if you aren't the right shape, you need to change, and change is loss.
Yeah. But knowing the right amount
or
of that.
gain sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it is. But maybe that's like the thing about water, right? Is that it adapts to its container. It has no solidity in and of itself. And maybe that's the problem maybe with any element, right? Is that you get too extreme on it and you get sort of the worst of it. Yeah, so when you have no like container of your own, maybe if you're just too water, it's like you have no it can be like almost no sense of self, but there can be, you become whatever somebody else wants you to become. There's a too much giving away of the self. Yeah. And
you just become absorbed in the sponge.
Yeah. Or you, and that's maybe the other thing, is that water accommodates its environment. Water comes into the space, and if there's something already in it, I'm not going to intrude on you thing. I'm going to surround you and envelop you and maybe destroy you if it's Scorpio water. I don't know. or slowly wear you down. But I think that's also maybe the thing to think about too. It's like you very rarely get the full extreme version of something. And usually like why Venus is great is because it's not a full-on version of that. It's, the right amount. It knows the distinction of like, this is where I compromise. This is, maybe not where I compromise. Like I guess why the signs that Venus rules are really, they make sense for Venus, because you get Taurus just takes Venus nature and creates solidity, solid boundaries. And commitment, where commitment, it just makes sense to Taurus. I almost feel like I can't describe it, where it's like, I commit to this. This works. I like it. Feels good.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep doing this. Oh, I don't like that.
Why would I change if it's not working?
Yeah. Why would I bother to change this? This has been working. Why would I not eat Mexican food every night? Because Mexican food's delicious. Until maybe something convinces Taurus, like, oh, okay, maybe I should try something else. Anyway, Libra too. I mean, Libra's the scales, right? It's about finding balance. And that makes sense for Venus.
Taurus is inner peace and Libra is outer peace. Inner world peace versus outer world peace. I'm going to make a beautiful environment versus I've got a beautiful environment.
Yeah. But I'm going to seek out one.
Yeah.
More Libra. But when you think about Venus's exaltation in Pisces, it's like the most, in some sense, the wateriest of the watery. It has no limits or boundaries. Is that, why is that good for Venus? Is it good, or is it good for...
Is it good?
The people around Venus?
Is it good for the people in power, or is it actually good for Venus? I mean, I know.
Venus that will do whatever I tell Venus to do, that will conform to my every desire. That's kind of Venus.
One of the reasons I asked you to come in and teach about essential dignity to my chart interpretation course instead of doing it myself is because I've, going back to the conversation that we were having about essential dignity last week, I really wrestle with essential dignity because I don't know if this is my Aquarius, Moon, and Jupiter or what, but I look at the essential dignity system and I'm like, yeah, of course, Mesopotamian kings wanted their women to be pliable and submissive and going along with whatever they wanted. Of course, Venus was going to be exalted in Pisces.
Yeah.
And, of course, you want a well-disciplined army.
I'll forgive you for anything.
Yeah, exactly. You can get away with all kinds of shit with Venus and Pisces. No offense to people who have it, but
no, I love Venus and Pisces. It's great. It is.
Oh yeah,
it's beautiful and wonderful for lots of reasons. But
I mean, I have to say, it's wonderful for everyone else. When Venus was in Pisces, it was really difficult for me because, like, on the one hand, I could see that wonderful things happen for me, a situation in a relationship that was stuck. All of a sudden, Venus went into Pisces and it wasn't stuck anymore. But at the same time, like, I think that this might be my Venus and Aries talking, but everybody else is like, everything is going swimmingly, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with this. I just feel like I'm a dissipated puddle. Like, how do you even deal with this nonsense? Like, there's no energy, there's no life. Everybody's just sitting around hedonistically drinking themselves to death. Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
But I look at essential dignity, and like I was delighted by our conversation last week because left to my own devices, I'm just going to see power games everywhere.
Yeah, it's like Venus trying to deal with like all the conquesty, selfishy kind of energy of Aries. I don't know. It's like from Venus's perspective, that's what Aries looks like. Aries isn't all about that, and it's has great qualities of it. Venus is just going to struggle with figuring out how to make beautiful things out of that, or how to be yielding and accommodating to maybe in an environment that expects different things, or recognizing that there's a problem maybe with the things that it's being asked to be yielding and accommodating to, that it has that maybe, it's Venus, but it has to stand up for itself. And that's and I think it's what you end up getting to, and it gets even more complicated maybe with falls and exaltations, but with detriments also often the confrontation is a little more head on. While with falls and exaltations, let's talk about falls, 'cause I like talking about those.
Yes.
I know I said last time that they're trying to reconcile opposites, and that's why it's hard. But I think actually what's really hard about falls is working with the ways that the planet and the sign are actually super compatible. So you think about Mars, maybe in Cancer. It's dealing with water. It's dealing with cardinal energy. And just think of like the archetype, like the symbol of Cancer is a crab. And then it has another domicile, Scorpio. And looking at these two head on, they look almost exactly the same. Like they look like very similar creatures. They have pincers. They have hard exoskeletons. They're arthropods, but one has a stingy tail and the other one doesn't. And I guess the way I think about it, maybe particularly with Mars and Cancer, is that it's people who have it are often excessively good at Mars things when it comes to like fighting. It's almost like hyperactive, and like you were saying, sensitive. Too much. The thing with I think falls is that there's too much on one end and not enough of the other, and it's also in a space that is where it has to kind of walk a tightrope. Put Mars in Cancer, if it's being wild Mars, whipping its tail that it doesn't actually have, but its claws around, it's going to be doing damage to the people that it cares most about, or so it has to like basically fight its own nature and find a way to channel it the best way possible. But it's like not lacking in its significations. It has a lot of them, but it also has another prerogative, maybe, or another job to do that it has to navigate, kind of like a minefield, I think that's like, that's why it's maybe more challenging traditionally, because it's, if you want peanut butter and all you have is ketchup, it's like, well, better get used to ketchup. I don't know. If you have peanut butter, but you really want sunflower seed butter, then, but maybe you're allergic to peanuts. You got to eat the peanut butter, and I don't know. It's confusing.
Yeah,
it can be
yeah.
hard to know exactly what the problem is, maybe, when you're dealing with a fall.
Yeah.
Because on one level it really works, and then on another level it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, Robert Hand says that Mars at its best is really protective.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when you try to contain Mars and put it in a space from which it can't escape that you actually get the war from Mars. And so
Yeah.
Mars's best expression is, mama bear protective energy. So it's kind of, when you look at it from that lens, it's kind of surprising that Mars is in fallen Cancer. But I think that you raise a really good point when you say that with Mars, it's in Cancer, it's difficult to not attack the people that you're closest to. It's almost like Mars in Cancer has the tendency to be a little bit scorpionic. Like I was mentioning earlier, Scorpios who maybe have a hard time recognizing that they have such a potent tail.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe with Mars in Cancer, there's a tendency to think, I am just this poor, weak little creature. I can't possibly hurt anybody, but it's the tiniest scorpions that you have to be the most afraid of, because those are the ones who are most deadly
and the most to prove.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was I've heard Robert Hand, it's a really good lecture he does on YouTube, or that ended up on YouTube, some old lecture from like the 90s, where he was talking
is it
about
the
Mars.
classical astrology one?
It might be the
like
same
6 hours.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
That's what I'm quoting. Yeah.
And I loved that about when he was talking about Mars, because it's like it makes sense. Even talking about like Mars is a nocturnal planet, not because it's like the Moon and Venus. It's because it's kind of like the opposite, but the best gets brought out when it's tempered, when it's in an environment that, as opposed to maybe being out on the attack and assaulting the fortress, defending the people that it cares about, or defending its home, only attacking when provoked, or
the bodyguard for the queen and the diplomat.
Yeah. And that ends up being actually know a lot of Mars and Cancer people. And they're the biggest sweethearts, and they're super protective of the people that they care about. But it sort of comes at a cost for them, where it's like they have to, they're constantly having to see the ways that they have to compromise with themselves to be there for the people they love, like to be, and to not take that Mars energy out on them, like if there's nobody outside attacking, it's like almost like they feel better when there is somebody outside, a threat from the outside, because they have an outlet for it. And I think that's maybe one of the ways to use a fall as well, like to work with it, is to find an outlet for both expressions. Because like Mars is still Mars, it needs to be Mars somewhere. Like giving it a Mars-like activity. It doesn't have to be combat. Combat's great if it's not actually hurting anyone, but paintball or something. Something competitive, something physical, to make Mars feel like, yeah, I'm doing Mars stuff and I'm still strong Mars. But also space to like do its job in Cancer. I guess I like to think of it as having a job there. In Cancer, it's almost like the job is sort of obvious, like is to protect people, be the the night watchman or something at home, at home base. And
so how does this play out for you as somebody with a Scorpio moon?
Well, it's the reverse, I guess, but it's kind of similar, where I like a lot of maybe Marsy things, attracted to Marsy things. God, it's hard to. Again, because
really
I live in the pit, right? So no, I live in the pit. No, it's because there are so many ways that it ends up working. Because it's a watery moon, I have a son, and it's very like involved. Like to be very involved dad, but sometimes I will struggle with maybe my my Mars-y kind of agenda of like needing to accomplish and carry out tasks, accomplish things, achieve things, accomplish my goals at any cost, right? That's Mars. But the cost would be similar in the sense that it means cutting away from maybe people that I care about or but there's like, I need to find balance there, knowing when to fight for my needs and when to when maybe my needs are unreasonable or too much, like, because there's the desire maybe element of the moon, which it's about needing and wanting, and is up, it's high, it's like that gets turned up, and maybe the wanting to go get it gets turned up, but then it's the moon, it doesn't have the equipment. I'm just a widow moon, it has a similar feeling of being unequipped for what it's trying to do, though often it's the that lost you for a second. What seems to be the case with fallen planets a lot is that it's like they are doing their job, but it just like sort of costs. They're sort of having to like tighten the reins or the grip or the hold on how you're operating, like constantly compromising. Maybe like often I want to do something. I want to do my will, do what I willst. But I have people that I'm responsible for that I need to take care of, and sometimes it means setting my agenda aside to do that, to be emotionally available, which it's complicated. I don't know.
It sounds like it's complicated for sure. Like, it almost sounds like there's a sense of self-sacrifice with fallen planets unless you can find a creative way to express them. So like, Mars in Cancer is like, by default, maybe it's the big Terminator dude in a nursery. But if you're in a war zone, you want a big Terminator guy in the nursery so that he can handle all of the threats that are coming in from the outside. And like, the moon is this in Scorpio is this, incredibly sensitive instrument that's being sent straight into the bowels of hell. But at the same time, we do send very sensitive instruments down into the center of volcanoes because we need that information. So it's almost like if you go with the default, it's the worst possible thing you can imagine. But with some creativity and under the right circumstances, it can be exactly what you need.
Yeah, actually, that was actually really well put. Like that, like it's the sensitive instrument. Sometimes it has to go into the extreme environment to measure, to get all the proper measurements that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have. And that's a theme that definitely comes up for other people with Scorpio moon that I know. And myself, it's like you end up coming into people's lives, when they're going through some shit, right? It's like they're, and that's sort of your job, is to be the moon, while other people are dealing with difficulties, dealing with trauma, dealing with big changes and transformations, sort of self-turnover. I feel like I've always had my eye on it, and I know that it can't be everybody always going through it, but I just end up meeting people when they're like, oh, you're going through a big change and there's part of you that's basically dying, and you have to sort of shed this part off of you and kind of come out the other side. I always think of the 6 of Swords card, which has like somebody, was like the ferryman, ushering souls across the river, Styx.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of the role.
So what you're basically saying is that we should call you Charon.
Who's Charon?
The ferryman. You have various people
that's his
across
name.
the
God,
steps.
jeez,
Yeah,
I thought I
yeah.
knew a lot about myths.
Also
But
one of Pluto's moons, but
now
yeah,
I have
yeah,
a thing to look up because that sounds compelling.
yeah. But yeah, that psychopomp role, like I really resonate with that a
Yeah.
lot. You know, we both have Pluto and Scorpio, and I
Mhm.
also have Saturn there in the South Node, and so, you know, I feel like I don't know if I've got some kind of